This is Dr. Ryan T. Cragun, and you are listening to Gospel Tangents.
Gospel Tangents is supported by users like you. Please support us at gospeltangents.com or on Patreon. Welcome to Gospel Tangents, the best source for Mormon history, science, and theology. I'm Rick Bennett. I'm excited to have Dr. Ryan Cragun. He's a sociologist at the University of Tampa there in Florida, and we're going to talk a lot about Mormon sociology, so you won't want to miss this conversation. Check it out. Welcome to Gospel Tangents. I'm excited to have an amazing sociologist. Could you go ahead and tell the audience who you are and where you teach?
Yeah, Ryan Cragun. I'm a professor of sociology. I like to say these days professor of empirical sociology, and I'm at the University of Tampa in Tampa, Florida.
All right. Well, you just made the news this week.
Conveniently, yeah, that just happened.
Before we get into that, though, let's talk a little bit about your academic background. Where'd you get your bachelor's and master's and PhD on all that?
So bachelor's degree was actually in psychology at the University of Utah, 2000.
Oh, you're a Utah man.
I'm a Ute, yep. And then I went to the University of Cincinnati, spent 6 years there, so master's degree in sociology there. And then my PhD in 2007 from the University of Cincinnati in sociology.
So you got two alma maters in the Big 12.
I do, and maybe your listeners will be appalled by this. A lot of people are. During my entire time at the University of Utah and University of Cincinnati, I never went to a single sporting event.
Oh my goodness.
Not a single one. So I get
appalled.
the Utes, the Bearcats, like big deal. It's just not my jam. Sorry. I've got my head buried in a book, right? I'm just not on the sidelines for the basketball or football teams. Just not my thing.
Well, we'll forgive you. I'm a huge sports fan. But
I get it. Most people are. It's all good.
My brother took a sociology class and he loved it. But I never equated sociology with social science statistics. I mean, can you give us a definition? What is sociology?
Sure.
For people like me who never took the class.
Right. No, that's totally fair. And it is weird, right? So when people say psychology, everybody's like, oh, you study the brain and counseling and abnormal psych, right? Or poli-sci or economics or any of these other disciplines, even criminology. Sociology is like, it's going to sound weird, and I'm not trying to be like, high horse here, but sociology is really the foundational discipline of most of the social sciences. Psych kind of comes about at the same time. But criminology, if you've heard of criminology, that's just social science that focuses on crime, right? It's literally just sociology. It's literally the same discipline. We have sociologists who just study deviance and crime. They're just sociologists. So they eventually split off and said, we're going to specialize. This is all we're going to look at. Same with political science, right? Same with public health. So all of those disciplines, they're basically sociology. They just have specialized and said, we're only going to study this one aspect of society. So sociology, it's founded in the mid-1800s, right? Basically, we just study social life. We don't go inside the head, right? So we're trying to understand groups of people and the influence of groups on the individual. So we study groups in aggregate, effectively. We study society. That's the big picture item. And the cool thing about a degree in sociology, I'm not trying to sell my discipline, right?
Go ahead.
Do whatever you want to do. But
it's fine.
The cool thing about sociology is we just give you the tools to then study whatever you want, right? So we have people who only study like demography, birth, death, migration type stuff, right? Like that's their area. But then we also have people who, can study like obscure religious groups or, tribal groups or whatever. Like you just get the tools and then you can go out and just study the social world. So that's what we do. I happen to specialize in religion, right? And then, of course, within that, I have two subspecialties. But like, you can obviously specialize whatever you want. My advisor in grad school did politics and religion. That was his area, right? So he did those two things. But there are people who study like race and health and like any number of social issues. But that's broadly what we do as sociologists.
And so, primarily, is this done through surveys?
Mixed methods, right? So some are more, we kind of have a divide, qualitative versus quantitative. So the qualitative people would do interviews, they might do focus groups, they might do historical research, they might study websites, they might study media, so they might actually be analyzing TV or movies, things like that. So anything that doesn't involve numbers at the end of the day. Then there's the quantitative side, which is very numbers focused. And that would be a lot of surveys, but then you can also get, national level data or federal data, data that's reported to the government. So there are people who study census data or other, like birth registries, health registry stuff. So there are lots of people who will do more quantitative stuff. I consider myself mixed methods, so I'll do both. It just depends on the question that is of interest to me. I lean quantitative, right? It's weird to say it.
This is why we get along.
Yes. Give me a data set and I am like ecstatic, right? I will get lost in a data set for hours. I just love it. There's something weird about my brain. I get that, right? But I will literally just do like a deep dive into a data set and hours will disappear. And I'm like, that was so much fun. Let me do it again, right? So yeah, I love data. So give me a good numbers data set. But, it's a mixed discipline, probably close to 50-50 in terms of qualitative versus quantitative.
Well, very good. So, sociology, I have a master's degree in statistics. I met you at the SSSR.
Right.
Remind our listeners what that stands for.
Society for the Scientific Study of Religion. So it's an annual conference put on by that association. I was for years the secretary of the association, but I've been attending that meeting regularly since 2001, my first year in grad school.
Wow.
Yeah.
So here's the amazing thing. Gospel Tangents, we claim to be the best source of Mormon history, science, and theology. We're usually kind of weak on the science, but I feel like you're a statistician.
Well, so it depends on how kind of knowledgeable your audience is, whether I want to claim that title or not. I certainly teach statistics, right?
Okay.
So I teach statistics, but in a sociological context.
Right.
So I'm very big into applied statistics. I love statistics. I'm very passionate about it. I am technically a mixed methods researcher. I tend to reserve for like a knowledgeable audience. I reserve the label statistician for someone who that's like their actual training, their area of expertise. At the end of the day, I'm a sociologist, right? Like I am a sociologist. I use statistics. I don't develop new statistical techniques. I'm not a true statistician. Do I use them all the time? Yes, absolutely. I can teach statistics, but I'm not technically a statistician.
Okay. Well, I have a master's degree in biostatistics from the University of Utah.
Go Utes.
And so I love talking about this. I read your paper and I was like, why haven't I known about SSSR sooner? I had a listener, in fact, he's going to be coming up, Scott Vance.
Yep.
He told me that he was coming to Salt Lake City. And I met him and I met you there.
Right.
And I was like, why didn't I know about this conference sooner? Because luckily it was in Utah this year. Do you know where it's going to be next year?
Pittsburgh.
So
Moves around the country. Yeah.
Okay. So that's near Monongahela, Pennsylvania, where the Bickertonites headquarters are. So I'm going to have to make a trip to Pittsburgh, I guess.
Come join us. Yeah, we're a friendly bunch. So.
And aren't you the vice president of the Mormon
Social Science Association? Right now, I'm just the treasurer.
So
I was the president at one point. Triple SR goes back more than 50 years. I don't remember the exact start date, but the MSSA was started in the 1970s. Glenn Vernon and Armin Moss were two of the big names there who started it. Marie Cornwall was an early member. So there have been a number of members. Gary and Gordon Shepard, I don't know if they were right there at the beginning, but they've been around for a long time. But yeah, it's the Mormon Social Science Association. We've been around since the 1970s. It's basically just an association for anybody who's interested in the social science of Mormonism. So we don't do theology. That's not our jam. And we really don't do history, right? There's obviously the MHA, the Mormon History Association. They do their own thing. We're for the social scientists. We've got economists, we've got psychologists, social scientists, anthropologists, political science. All of them are involved.
As a math guy, this excites me.
Sure.
It might not excite my audience, but it excites me. So, because I think Thomas Murphy is the new president coming in.
He is the new president.
And Jana Reese just finished her 3-year term.
Exactly, yeah.
I don't know why I didn't know about this sooner.
We're a much smaller organization than the MHA,
Yeah.
right? And that's fine, right? And there aren't a ton of social scientists out there who have interest in Mormonism or are Mormon. You don't have to be Mormon, right? It's just if you've got an interest, we'd love to have you.
Yeah. It was super fun. A lot of statistics. It's right up my jam.
Yeah, that's what we do.
So I'm hoping to get a lot more of you guys on there. I know Nancy Ross, formerly of Dixie State, now Utah Tech.
Right.
She's in the presidency or something, isn't she?
She's a board member.
Board member.
She's a board member right now. I'd have to double check. I hope I'm not getting that wrong. Yeah.
And so there's a lot of cool people. There is a little bit of overlap with MHA, but like Quinn Monson.
He has attended some of our meetings.
Yeah,
Yes,
he
so-
presented. I need to get him on. He did a really interesting presentation.
Yeah.
And I think you presented 3 or 4 papers, didn't you?
I was on a lot of papers at SSR. I try not to do that anymore, but I had 2 students who I was presenting with, and then I had like 3 different co-authors who were all presenting. Had everything worked out perfectly, I would have been on 6 papers and presented none of them because they were all co-authored, right? But my one student couldn't make it in the last minute, and so I ended up presenting that one paper.
Okay.
Otherwise, I was literally on 6. Oh, well, one was an author meets critic on my new book. So obviously I had to participate in that one. But otherwise, I wasn't going to give any presentations, even though I was on a bunch. Yeah.
Got your fingers in a lot of pies.
I do. I keep busy. Yeah, keeps me busy.
Well, you made the news this week with the headline was Utah is no longer a Mormon majority state. And your numbers are quite different than the church's numbers.
Indeed.
We need to dig into why is that?
I mean, it's actually pretty simple. I think your listeners will get this pretty quickly. The way that the LDS Church tracks its membership is anybody who's been baptized, they basically stay on the rolls until those individuals formally resign, right? So they can leave and they'll pull them. Or if they are tracking them, they know who they are and they die, they'll pull them. But if they lose track of somebody, they keep them on the rolls until they're 110 years old and then they pull them, right? So the LDS Church is saying, oh yeah, Utah's like 60% LDS. Well, we're not saying that they're wrong in the sense that it's possible 60% of the people in the state were at one point baptized members of the church, but that's not how many self-identify, right? And as social scientists, when we do surveys, the only thing we can use is how people identify, right? So if you identify as being a member of the church, great, we count you as a member of the church. But if you don't, we're not going to count you as a member of the church. So our data is self-identification, and it's a representative survey of the state of Utah, and it came in at 42%. So we've got a gap of about 18%. And as I've been telling a lot of reporters this week, that 18% gap reflects the tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of people in the state of Utah who at one point were members of the church and don't identify that way anymore. So it's a pretty big gap.
Huge gap.
Yeah, it's a big gap.
Because we go from majority to minority, right?
60% all the way down. And part of what, I think is really interesting about what's happened in the state, we cite in the paper a number of studies, a number of news articles, basically, right? So back in like 2001, the Salt Lake Tribune said that Utah was like 62.5% LDS. Then at 2010, it dropped down to like 60.6%, right? I'm not going to get those numbers exactly right. And then in 2001, it was still sitting at 60%, right? That makes no sense. I mean, just let's be honest, right? Over a 20-year window, there's a slight decline of maybe 2% LDS in this state. You live here, Rick, right? Mm-hmm. You live in Lehigh, okay? Mm-hmm. Are all of your neighbors people from this state at this point?
People from the state. Well, let me just tell you.
And I know Lehigh's a little bit weird, but
I live in a very, very Mormon community. In the 30 or so houses around me, I think there's 2 people that are not Mormon.
Right.
And two families, I guess I should say. So
this isn't the perfect place to ask.
This isn't the
question.
perfect place because it's like 95% Mormon in my community. Now, I do know I have a few neighbors that have maybe fallen away that may not identify as Mormon, which I think is an interesting thing we can talk about.
Yep.
But they don't attend church anymore, but they used to. When I first moved here 10 years ago, like everybody was Mormon.
Sure.
There's a person that lives here that wears Auburn flag. I talked to him one time.
Okay.
So they're from Alabama.
Gotcha.
Not Mormon. They're the one family. And I think there was another one that is not Mormon. But every other one of them, even though they may not come to church, and I would estimate, and I know I live in Mormonville.
You do. It doesn't get much more Mormon than Mormonville here.
No.
Lehigh is pretty Mormon.
It's like, I want to say, I mean, since COVID, not as many people, but I would say we're 80 to 90% active.
I would be surprised by that, but it's probably higher.
Because I could drive you around and I'll be like,
point
active,
out all the
active,
houses,
active. Like, I know.
Right.
So, and I know I'm in a Mormon bubble.
You're in a Mormon enclave.
And
we
I
have
know
to
it's
do
not
is-
like that in Salt Lake
Right.
County.
All we have to do is drive to Sandy or Murray or any of these other small communities right outside of Salt Lake or even Salt Lake City. It's a radically different place. And even my hometown. So I grew up in Morgan, Utah, right? So for any of your listeners,
you're a
who know
Trojan.
Morgan, I am a Trojan. Good for you. He knows the Trojans. My hometown, right? I remember seeing these numbers, again, church data. So how reliable it is, I don't know. But when I was growing up in the 1980s and 90s, it was 90+% LDS.
Right.
Right. I can guarantee it is not that anymore. My brother is a real estate agent up there. Almost all the people moving in are moving in from out of state. Right. And of course, lots of people are leaving the church too, but there are a lot of people moving in from out of state. 1 in 13 people in Utah were born in California. Right.
That doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, the numbers are just huge. And so the biggest contributor to this decline in the percentage isn't actually secularization, people leaving the church. It's actually in-migration to the state from people who are not LDS. That's done more than actually people leaving the church. The big discrepancy is people leaving the church, right?
Yeah.
But the decline of the percentage Mormon in Utah is actually in-migration is the biggest contributor.
In-migration more than, and I hate to use the words apostasy, but you kind of used it in your article.
Well, we would say exiting, religious exiting. I don't like the term apostate because it's a loaded political term. It usually means people have turned against the religion. The vast majority of people who leave religions just are indifferent. They don't care. They don't want to do anything with it.
Well, and it is interesting because of my podcast, I didn't know as many people as what I would call a dual citizen. So I have a friend.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I have two friends. Let's talk about the one first.
Sure.
He got baptized in the Episcopal Church. I attended his baptism in Salt Lake City. He's still on the LDS rolls.
Mm-hmm.
He even told me, because I just talked to him this week, that his bishop and stake president are aware that he's attending the Episcopal Church, but they don't care because he's not like proselytizing or anything like that.
Yeah.
Another friend is a leader in a polygamous group, told me that his records are still on the LDS Church. And I guess that does bring up a question because he jokes, I'm still a Mormon even though you're an ex-Mormon. So he would claim Mormon even though he's what we would say a fundamentalist Mormon. Sure. Do you take into account someone like that?
Yeah, the way we worded the question, right, I think would make it pretty clear. And if I'm not mistaken, I'd have to go back and look at the data. We had 1,909 respondents in that
Which is
survey.
a big sample.
It's a good sample, right? We wanted a nice big sample so I could say, like, we can speak pretty definitively about this. We worded it taking into consideration what the most common responses were going to be. So at the very top was LDS or Mormon, right? So that was the response option they could choose. Now, could a fundamentalist Mormon have picked that? That's possible, right? But I think the number one was LDS Mormon, then we had non-religious, then Catholic, and then we had a couple of others. And then we had an other option. And going through those others, because I want to recode everybody into the right categories, we had one person who said FLDS. So of all 1,909, one person said FLDS. So they were aware enough at least to mark themselves out, and they did not get coded back in as Mormon. So we did keep them separate in there. They would have just been coded as the other, right?
Because there are, I've talked to Lindsay Hansen Parker Park. And there are an amazing number of fundamentalists still on the LDS rolls, maybe even attend the LDS church in some cases not.
Right.
That would, even with President Nelson saying, don't use the word Mormon anymore, they're like, well, I'm still a Mormon.
Right.
And I don't know, in a sample of 2,000, it might be hard to tease that out. But I guess I was surprised what was the second highest option in your survey.
Oh, the non-religious.
Right.
Yeah. That's not, for those of us who are studying trends in religion across the nation in particular, and my most recent book is about around the world, right? I like to give a specific set of numbers just to put this in context. In 1990 in the US, 7% of adults said they had no religious affiliation. By 2001, that had jumped up to 14%, so it had doubled, right? As of today, we're hovering around 30% of adults in the US say they have no religious affiliation. So it's weird to say it, but it's the fastest growing quote unquote religious group in the US is those who have no religious affiliation. And that's not just some phenomenon that's affecting like people in, Washington State or Portland or California or San Francisco. It's across the entire nation this is happening. So I was not at all surprised. I mean, we've been watching these numbers just grow over the last 20 to 30 years. People are leaving religion in droves in the U.S., just massive exodus out of churches. The only religions, and I use that term very carefully, right, that are growing in the U.S. right now are actually non-denominational megachurches. All the others, as a percentage of the population at a minimum, are losing members. And then you have some like Southern Baptists. Over the last 15 years, lost over 6 million members, right? I mean, the decline of religion in the U.S. is the biggest story of religion over the last 30 years. Like, there's just no question. The decline of religion has been dramatic in the U.S. And it's affecting the LDS Church, too. They're losing members left and right.
When I read that, I had to text one of my relatives who used to be active and is no longer active.
Sure.
And I said, would you identify, if you got this survey, would you identify as Mormon, none, or something else? And she said none. And I was pretty surprised to hear that, because you said in your article that you think the majority of the nuns are former LDS.
In Utah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, this was about Utah, yeah. And so do you have any sense of, you said it was 30%, is that right?
In the state of Utah, I mean, it's going to be close to that. It's right around there. Yeah.
Do you have a sense for, of that 30%, how many of them are former LDS versus never LDS?
Probably close to 2/3.
2/3.
Former LDS. Yeah,
okay.
Probably something like that.
And so would that push those numbers up to 60%?
It'd get really close. Yeah, it would get really close.
Okay. So we can account for that 60% as LDS and nuns.
Yeah, pretty much. Right, which is interesting. I mean, several people have asked me, because there was a Salt Lake Tribune reporter a couple of years ago, maybe even last year, who was the one who found out that when they were reporting those numbers, right, 60% of the state is still LDS, they went county by county using the church's data, and they found one county where the church was reporting more members than there were people in the county, right? So a lot of people were like, was that you? And I was like, no, that was actually a reporter for the Salt Lake Tribune, which I thought was hilarious, because we've kind of known this for a long time. We just finally have the data to say definitively, like, there you go, right? The numbers the church is reporting reflect their very odd accounting method, right?
Okay.
And that's fine. I'm not saying that it's wrong. It's just not very useful for actually understanding what's going on with religion in Utah, right?
Okay.
So it's a very different way to think about it. And that's, I mean, kind of the big takeaway in our paper is like, their numbers are their numbers. They're just not useful numbers for us.
I hope you enjoyed our conversation with Dr. Ryan Cragun from the University of Tampa. In our next conversation, we're going to talk about how other churches track membership and also the rise of the nuns.
The Catholic Church does not kind of bet everything on their numbers. They know they're big, right? They're huge. But they don't kind of push this idea out there that it's like, we're growing and therefore we're true, right? And I know the church doesn't emphasize that as much, but come on. Growing up when we did, this was a huge part of the rhetoric, right? It's like, if we weren't God's church, then why would we be growing, right? And today they're not really growing, right? They might be offsetting the losses that they have from people leaving the church by the converts and, you know, the new kids coming up. But honestly, the LDS church is like barely treading water in my take at this point.
Thanks for listening, and I hope you to continue to enjoy Gospel Tangents. Consider becoming a Patreon or go to gospeltangents.com/shop, and you can get a cool tie, a hat, or even a nice mug. You can also get a sweatshirt. So check it out at gospeltangents.com/shop.